Thanks everybody for coming today. I'm just going to say a few words about what the Oral History Center kind of does, and then I'm going to introduce our distinguished speaker. The Oral History Center at Robert Morris was created essentially to foster first-hand accounts of history from people who have lived through important events. And in history, we call this primary sources. And primary sources are first-hand accounts of major events of the past. And Robert Morris has been blessed to have this wonderful project of having veterans of the U.S. military students through scholarships and things like that. And so one of the things that we've been able to do is we've been interviewing veterans of foreign wars in the United States, and we're going to continue to do that. And to have Carl here today is an amazing honor, and we're excited that it's going to highlight our continued efforts to do so. Our guest speaker is a very, very important primary source from a really central event in American history. That's, of course, World War II. And World War II has been written about by countless scholars and writers, but it's really amazing how many unbelievable stories continue to emerge about this central event in 20th century history. And the story of the Forgotten 500 really highlights a couple of things that have really been forgotten largely about World War II. And one of those is the intensity of the fighting in southeastern Europe in the former Yugoslavian territories. Another is the efforts of the Serbian people at resisting fascism. And then finally, of course, it highlights the story of these 500 amazing servicemen. So our guest speaker today is Carl Walpusk, and he served in the American Army for 38 years. He retired at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army and Colonel in the Pennsylvania National Guard. And he is, of course, one of the Forgotten 500, but forgotten no more. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to everybody Carl Walpusk.
I'm not used to one of these. Normally I have enough volume that I can get out most anywhere. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, particularly because I know there are some 50 students here. I always like to address them, hoping to instill some kind of fervor in their hearts about being a patriot in this country. Now, I was drafted in 1943, went and was assigned to the Army Air Corps. I joined the 449th Bomb Group in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then transferred to the 98th Bomb Squadron. I was a supply sergeant started my career, and when we moved from Alamogordo up to Bruning, Nebraska, the first night we were there, we were working in the back of a big building, and this charge of quarters left the fire go out. So he goes outside, brings in a 5-gallon can of gas, puts some on the coal shovel, and throws it in to the stove. It ignited, and like I said, dummy, you waste a shovel around in the air trying to put the flame on. But he weighs it over this 5-gallon can of gasoline, which caught on fire. He tries to pick up a can of gas, burns his hand, and spills it. Sergeant and I were in the back of the building. There was only 2 doors, one in front, one in back, and we were back, and it was locked from the outside. No windows, no nothing. He he helped me, we broke the glass at the top. He got me out, and then he came out. I spent about, I guess, 2 weeks in the hospital, burns in the hands and face. He spent the rest of his career in a cast from his waist up and was eventually discharged. So that was my first move I ever made in the Army, which didn't turn out too well. Well, from there, we moved down to Newport News in Virginia. The board ships to go to Europe. We got on and sailed for, I don't know, 5-6 days. And this was a troop, not a troop ship, it was a cargo ship. And we stacked 3 high bunks. And it was closed, you didn't open anything because of lights and so forth, the submarine. So the one thing is, you didn't want to be in the bottom bunk because virtually everyone was getting sick. And if you was down there, you're sure going to get a dose of something sometime or other. But anyhow, we landed in Oran, Africa, and spent the Christmas of 1944 there. We stayed there for about a week and then boarded another ship, took us up to Naples, Italy, where we spent the night in a bombed out building, sleeping on a concrete floor. We was afraid to go outside because guarding our compound there was a bunch of Gurkha soldiers. I don't know if you know about that. They carry a knife about that long and parade around, and supposedly they don't take nothing from nobody. So there was nobody trying to even see Naples that night. From Naples, we trucked down to Lecce, down the southern part of Italy. We were about the next to the last, our first bomb groups into Italy. So anytime we flew, we were flying much further than most of the other, because as the bomb groups were in, they kept moving north on up toward the fighting area more. But anyhow, as a surprise organ, I was sitting one night with the executive officer in the room, supply room talking, and he started mentioning about becoming an aerial gunner. And I thought, that sounds pretty good. The big thing about it was, if you flew 50 missions, you were done. You could go home. I figured, man, I can do that in about 3 months. Because the way they're flying, every other day or so, I could make it. Well, it didn't turn out that way. I'm glad I didn't read some of the stuff I read lately about how long the life of an air crew was, depending whether you was in the 8th Air Force in England and in the 15th down in Italy. Basically, 3 out of 10 air crews made their missions and were able to go on home. The rest of them were shot down, captured, and so forth. But anyhow, I volunteered, and they gave me about 3 days of training on the machine gun, identifying the German airplanes. Now, to this day, I couldn't identify. The day we were attacked, I called it to the wrong thing. I couldn't identify a ME-109 from a PW-51 coming at me. The only thing I can identify is when the wings start shooting tracers at me. Then I knew it was a German. But anyhow, this day, after I'd gone over, I was on my 16th mission when the pilot who was from Connellsville, PA, was Paul Mayer was a state trooper, came out and said, we're going to Pulaski. There was nobody happy because that was the highest, most densely fortified target that we bombed in the southern part of Italy. But anyhow, all the crew took it. See, one thing I don't know if people really know, flying or any of these things is strictly voluntary. You volunteer or you can unvolunteer anytime. Whether you're a ranger, Green Beret, or whatever it is, that's volunteer work. But anyhow, that morning we took off. We got up around 5 and washed up and went to date and drew our parachutes and our medical kit. The medical kit had morphine in it, and some bandages, and it contained a packet of money for the country you was flying over. So if you were shot down, you had some money that you might be able to do some good. But anyhow, we started over to this target, and man, I didn't believe that anti-aircraft. I don't know where in the Lord all these guns came from, but the sky was black above us, below us, beside us, and the worst part about flak is there's nothing you can do. You got this big airplane with real thin aluminum on it that I think a BB gun could probably shoot through. And you have to keep going on target. You can't go up, you can't go down. If you move, there's flights flying all around you, up above you, below you, beside you. You could get bombed on, or if you could bomb somebody down below you. So you had to keep going, hoping that you didn't get it. Well, anyhow, we made it through, and about 10 minutes later, I look out, I was flying right waist, and I look back and I see this speck in the sky, and all of a sudden I said, that's a damn airplane. And I said, that's an P-51. Well, it turned out to be an ME-109. And he started shooting at us, and it went on for about 15 minutes. We started dropping further and further back out of the formation. Couldn't keep up. I couldn't see where we shot up at. They shot up the hydraulic system, some of the engines. So we had to drop back, and there we were, sitting ducks by herself. The rest of the formation had gone on. Well, by that time, the pilot rings the bell, which means get the heck out. So put the parachute on, step back, and there's a hole just about that big that you lift the lid, and you can, in the back there, you can drop through. I looked for my buddy who left waist, and he was gone. I don't know how he beat me, because I was pretty fat. But anyhow, I bail out, and I tell you, if you want a joke, let a parachute open on you. It isn't that damn easy. Depending on particularly how you have your strap fixed, you could get really injured, but it's a shock. Anyhow, floating down, I was marveling how you couldn't tell you were falling, from 20,000 feet. Beautiful. I look around, enjoying the scenery. I look off to my left, and here comes this fighter plane. And I thought, holy hell, he's going to shoot me out of my chute. But instead, he flopped his wings, continued to fly back toward Romania. I couldn't believe it. I said, man, today's my lucky day. But anyhow, we kept down, and all of a sudden I started to realize I'm going pretty darn fast. When you get to be about 200-300 feet above the ground, you get that sensation that you've fallen. And I looked down, and this is a hillside, and there's nothing but brush. And there was one big rock. The rock was probably 10-15 feet high, and 15, 20 feet around. And I'm heading right for that sucker. And I figured, Lord, and I'm trying to pull the shroud to guide it, but you can't do it very well in these older parachutes. These new ones you can drop in on the dime. But anyhow, I missed the rock, and I'm taking my chute off, and I look up the hill, and there's two guys in uniform standing on a rock about 150 yards above me. And I thought, oh, well, again, am I going to take my 45 and try to shoot at these two guys with a rifle, or am I going to quit and surrender? So I made up my mind I'm going to surrender. So I started to walk up the hill, and the one guy ties a white rag to his end of his rifle and starts waving it. And I said, oh boy, at least I'm not going to get shot there. Anyhow, we go up and they motion for me to follow when they start walking down the road. And this is in the middle of July. And I got my big sheepskin coat and pants in there, and I'm sweating like something going to election. But anyhow, I start peeling them off and throwing them around, and we come to a house that was alongside the road, and there was a woman standing there, and I motioned to her that I was thirsty. So she goes in the house and comes out with a big glass of water. I thought, I take that sucker, and I had one swallow down, the other was starting. When I realized it's Rakia, 100% proof. I about choked. Man, that's it. But anyhow, we continued on, and we come down to this little village, and out comes two guys with two horses. They put us on the horse, take us into town. As we come into town, there's a platoon of Chetniks coming by and giving us a salute, you know. So, man, we're going to be in good shape. But anyhow, we went down and had a meal that night. Again, they were feeding us this rock here. And we finally went to bed, I'm guessing, around 10 o'clock. We couldn't go to sleep because all these people were standing around and singing all night. All they did was drink and sing. We finally went to sleep. The next morning we started out, and on the way we started picking up the rest of our crew. One here, one there, and so forth. And we got up into the woods, and there was a picnic ground up there, and there was probably 30, 40 people dancing the cola. I don't know, I'm sure the serving people know what the cola is. They dance around in circles, holding each other's hand. And the one girl comes over with me to dance. I pointed down, I bunged up my ankles a little bit that I couldn't do it. She didn't want to take no for an answer. Kept pulling me to go, but I didn't go. But from that point on, that's the last time I've seen a young female. And the whole time I was down, no matter where we went, from farmhouse to farmhouse, there was no young people. They either went to town to work or they was in the army. But anyhow, we kept going, and we started. I did every day. We stayed at a different farmhouse. Now these are farmhouses that are 30 acres, 20 acres, nothing big. They have a cow, and maybe a horse, 2 or 3 sheep, a couple chickens. And that was the people that were feeding us. You knew it was a hardship on them, but these people were generally, I would say, in their late 50s, early 60s. And they were making a living by farming this farm, and they had no modern tools. They're using sickles and scythes, stuff like that to do their harvesting. So we kept doing that, and every night we'd sleep in the barns, in the hayloft, under a haystack out in the middle of the field going. And the bad part was the only clothes we had was shirt and pants and socks and underwear that we started out with. So we got to the point where we were starting to smell a little bit. So we found the stream and went down and stripped and washed our clothes out on rock. We had no soap. And we laid it out on the grass to dry and waited for a couple hours to dry so we could put it back on. And we did that a couple of times while we were there. And one day, they called us together and General Mihalovich came and addressed us. And of course he had to do it through an interpreter because he didn't speak English. And the thing they did was implore us when we got back to get the United States to help them, give them some kind of material. They had nothing. You'd see a guy, I seen a guy on October, he had a shotgun. Now this shotgun had shells in it. To hold the shells in it, he had wrapped paper around it so that the firing pin would hit it in the middle. Now, you can't expect them to do a heck of a lot if they don't have anything. But that was their one purpose that General Mihalovich did. And he visited us one other time while we were out there. But these places that gave us, we got 2 meals a day. And another thing that was hard, they made their bread black bread. And they must have used a stone grinding wheel to grind the flour. No big mill. And when you ate this bread, you were getting quite a bit of sand. And the bad part was the next day or so when you had to move them. And that was like putting out sandpaper. Oh, you tried your damnedest not to have to do it. But the bad part was we was always hungry. So some of them would put out a loaf or two of bread and have it sliced. The first thing when they turned their back, and want a slice of bread, so you have something that evening to munch on. But I often wonder about those people, how in the Lord they could do that, feed you, and you know they didn't have much to feed you. And the worst part was, if they got caught doing it, they were dead people. They would just be shot. And it burned down their houses. The Germans would burn down a whole cotton picking village if they caught them harboring one of us. All my life since I lived here, I paid tribute to them people. I don't know how I can thank them except trying to educate people like you about what kind of people they were and what they did for us. My gosh, it took a lot of guts to take care of it. We ran in my crew stayed together. There would be 9 of us traveling together, so my goodness. So that's the one thing I have all done ever since. It's about the only way I know of trying to pay them back a little bit by telling people what wonderful people they were. These people known as Chetniks in Yugoslavia. But keep going on that. We went for day after day doing that. And another thing I can wonder, there was 250 of us taken out on the first flight. Now, if you break that down by crews, that meant there was at least 25 crews. So that meant that there was 25 families taking care of us every cotton picking day. And we kept moving every day. So how many families was there in that old area taking care of us, feeding us, and trying to do whatever they could to help us out? I often wonder, and I said it before, if something happened like this in this country, I'm sure we'd have some. I don't think you'd have a big rush to do what they were doing. Put your life out on the line for somebody you didn't know. Did you take care of them and feed them and watch over them? I hope we would, but I don't know if that would happen. So anyhow, we kept doing that day after day. Now, I'll tell you one place I came to, and it's hard to believe. We went down, and this was a big building where the whole family lived. Well, like I said, whole family. You only ever seen a man and wife. We went into this place. It had a ground floor. There was no anything on the walls. There was no ceiling. You looked up and you seen the rafter, just like that. There was chickens roosting on the rafters. They had a big picnic table there with benches. And while we sat down, they had a big community bowl, a soup. And there was two chetniks there, and they had great big beers. And everybody was laying food out of that bowl. And the guys were missing, drop down their beer, go back into the bowl. I just to tell you some condition. Now that was the poorest place I've been. Most of them had nice little houses, but no, I never seen electricity. I never seen no indoor plumbing. Every morning you'd see the family walking down toward spots in the woods and then coming back. Because there was no, they may have had a pump inside the house, I don't know that for sure. But there sure was no luxury in living there and working with those people. And several times during the night when we woke up and they'd take us out and go because there was German patrol coming through. I could never figure out how, with no telephones, no nothing, how they got the messages around that quick, but they did. But the patrol left wherever they were from. First thing you know, all through the community, all through the hills, the word was out. They'd come get us, take us someplace to hide in the woods, and then next day bring us to another place. You want me to use it? All right, I'll do that. The reason I don't, I have hearing aids, and it's worse with these things than speaking. It amplifies what I'm saying about triple. So it's ringing in my ear when I use the microphone, but I'll do it. I thought I was loud enough. That's the first time I had people tell me I didn't speak loud enough. Trying to think, well, getting on to, you've seen the pictures of those people that dropped in on some of the OSS. The first time they dropped in, Captain Mullins and the radio man dropped in that night, and we had to go out. We were the youngest crew down there. By youngest, I mean we was down the shortest period of time. So we were elected to light these lamps along the field that they was going to drop in when they come over to parachute in. So we did that, and the next thing you know, we hear the airplane, but couldn't see it. And pretty soon here Captain Mullen and the other one came walking and they had missed the target by about 100 yards and they walked in. From that time on, we started getting some support. See, the one thing that they was afraid to do, they were thinking that the possibility the Germans were trying to trick them to come in and rescue somebody that wasn't there. Because when you got arrested, the minute you went down, they transmitted back to Italy your name, rank, and serial number. And then you had to give something that only your family would know, so that they would know that what you said is true. So we all did that. And that was one reason they were slow in having the OSS take over and start dropping people in to help us. And their first job was to verify we were who we said we were. And then from that point on, about a week or so later, they come in with an airdrop, dropped in food, some shoes, and stuff like that. The only problem was, they thought all the airmen were little guys. Well, all the Turk people are. And the shoe size ran from about 6 to 7.5, 8. So people like me with 10 and 11, you didn't get no shoes. Now, the other thing is they drop a K ration. Not too many people know what a K ration is. That's the first ration that they fed during World War II. It came in a little box about that thick, and inside it had some dough cookies, and they had a can of, I hated the damn Spam, and some cigarettes. But we were glad to get it when they did it, because it would have been, like I said, every day we was hungry, not that to the point where it was miserable, but we were hungry, we could stand to eat. Well, that went on, and then we started coming to the point where they were getting ready to leave. Now this airfield, they called it, was on the top of a hill, and it's just a field, and they had taken the rocks and stuff like that, and they could only work 1 or 2 people at a time because the Germans flew reconnaissance planes. They couldn't give away that they were trying to make that an airfield. So it took them quite a while to get it cleared up so that they could land. But anyhow, that was one of the big problems these people had doing it. And I'll tell you, it was just long enough. It couldn't have been much shorter than what it actually was. Where'd I go to? But after they dropped the food in, like I said, we started getting ready to go, and they're going to go out by how long you've been down. They come in the nighttime with, I think it was 3 airplanes, took the sick and the wounded out, and the next morning they come in with about 7 airplanes to take out the rest. So naturally, we were the last crew to get on and get out of there, and that was no fun. They'd get enough speed to get out the end, and then they'd have to start down this valley so they could gather speed. Now this valley was, I think you might have had 3-4 feet difference between the length of the wings and where the tree line was. At least it looked that way for me. I thought, Lord, they're not gonna make it. But anyhow, they went down through there and get enough speed, and then you got it up to speed, and you raised up and flew with the rest of them. And they had enough fighter planes around to really take care of you that day. The day we got shot down, I didn't see any fighter aircraft. I don't know, they might have been with another group, but there was none there protecting our particular flight. So we got back to Italy. I think we landed in Foggia and got debriefed. told them what we did and what we did. I got credit that day for shooting down a ME 109, and they deloused us, gave us a shower, put new clothes on us, and about the next day, was down back with our old unit. Now again, I was fortunate. Well, one thing I want to tell you, when you're shot down and you don't come back to your base, the first thing they do is go to your bunk, collect all your personal things, put it in a bag, and hold it for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, they ship it up to a depot where they hold it for another 30 days before they ship it home. Now, the problem I had, and I know I was a supply sergeant, I had to do this several times, was distinguishing what to send back. You never knew if the man was married or whether he was signal. When you'd see these pictures, they were the hardest problem. If he was married, you didn't want to send a picture of a girlfriend back. So we didn't get too many pictures. Now, if it was a man and a wife and kids, no problem, but they always gave us a hard time trying to figure out what to send and what not to send. But anyhow, I was lucky because in the supply room we had a tailor. And so we had all our insignia signed back on, and I got mine because I knew the tailor fitted it, so I looked pretty doggone sharp. I got a tailor-made going on. Well, I'm going to end this part of it was a pleasure being here, and like I said, particularly having the high school students here. And truly, I didn't expect to have this size of a crowd here today. Now, they asked me to talk about what day today is. And they mentioned today's Constitution Day. Constitution Day. Now, what does that mean to all of us? How many people really know the Constitution? I admit that I don't know that well, but I do know some of the things that it does. This country's lived for over 200 some years based solely on what that Constitution does. It gives you and I certain rights. It gives our government certain rights. And it also, in some cases, says you can't do that. We got freedom of speech. We got freedom of religion. We got the right to vote. We got all those things that we can do, guaranteed. The government can form the Army, the Navy. They can make the post office. They can tax you, and all those things. That's in the Constitution in these articles. The one thing they can't do is send troops to your house to stay with you, which they used to do in the old days. When the forces came into town, they would take so many men and say, you got them for the week or whatever they're going to stay. You take care of them, you feed them. Well, there's that many things. I think all of us should be very grateful. Now, this thing wasn't written in a day or two. It took them a couple of years to write the Constitution from about 1787 on through that time. And when you look back on it, you think, boy, there's some pretty smart people that can see that far ahead where these things apply to us today as it did way back in that time. So I'm advising all of you, please honor that we wouldn't be here today probably free and all this stuff if we didn't have such a document. It's probably the best document ever written in any country. So thank you very much. I appreciate you coming.
Thanks again to Carl. That was really something. We're gonna. If students have to leave to go to class, that's why they're leaving. But we're gonna open the floor up for questions and answers here in a second. Before we do that, though, there's a couple of things I want to kind of highlight that Carl was saying to just kind of illustrate again the impact of his story on the broader story of World War II. And we have this wonderful little video presentation that's kind of rolling here. And there were two things in the presentation that caught my eye. The first is that Pitt made the Rose Bowl in 1938, which is kind of amazing. But the second one, there's a picture of General Mihaljevic, and it says he's Hitler's #1 headache, right? So the backstory to the Yugoslavian occupation is Mussolini, Hitler's minion sort of, wanted to occupy Yugoslavia at the beginning of World War II. And in 1941, Italy essentially invades Yugoslavia. Hitler, in the meantime, is preparing a much larger invasion of the Soviet Union. That's sort of his biggest goal. The Serbians resisted the Italian army so strongly that Adolf Hitler was forced to send several divisions of the German army to Yugoslavia to put down the Serbian resistance. And in doing so, it slowed the beginning of the invasion of the Soviet Union by a couple of months. And the German army did not get to Moscow and St. Petersburg before winter started. If they had, they might have won World War II. So whenever Carl is talking about these Serbian peasants who don't have running water and eat, black bread with sand in it and have very little, these are the people that are resisting two enormous armies, the Italians and the Germans, for several, they've been doing it now for like 4 years. And it's an amazing story, but it has a much broader impact on the war as well. And so that's really important. And Chetniks were Serbian nationalists who were fighting and resisting both Germany and the Italian army. By 1944, it was mostly Germany. So this is a really important story. These people built an airport from essentially nothing. It's an unbelievable thing. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that these amazing stories are interesting on a personal level, but they also have a broader impact on world affairs. And in the case of the Serbian resistance, it really did have an incredible impact on the outcome of World War II. So what we're going to do now is, if anyone in the audience, we'd love for people to raise their hands. If you have any questions for Carl, we'd love to hear from you. And you can raise your hand, ask it, and I can repeat it into the microphone, and we can kind of go on. Ben.
This is the 70th anniversary of this rescue, and on Monday, September 22nd, over on that exact airfield, the Goldwich airfield in Germany, for the first time in history, it's going to be recognized by Serbians and Yugoslavia. Because remember, for all those years, they were never allowed to talk about this. It says as if Mihaljevic and his Chetniks never existed, so that the Serbian government and the American embassy, ambassadors, all of those people will be there on that field this Monday. And Carl and I tried to make it, but we just couldn't make it because we were invited.
The question is, did he ever go back to Yugoslavia to return to visit?
I never had the money, honey. I'd love to, even today. I never had. There's one thing I didn't mention. One of the big problems the Chetniks had was that Marshal Tito and his partisans, they'd rather fight each other than fight the Germans. Now the bad part about it is, as I said, the United States quit giving supplies to the Chetniks, and it was because of one thing I found out later. The British had agents down with the partisans, Tito's party, and they were feeding the information back to England
there are two resistance movements going on in Yugoslavia. One, Chetniks, Serbians. The second that Carl mentioned, Tito, Marshal Tito, was Croatian, and the partisans were a group of Croatians and Serbians and others also fighting at the same time. And Carl said that they often had disagreements, but the Allied forces generally preferred to work with Tito, and when the war ended, Tito, of course, becomes the head of the new Yugoslav state.
I have to interject on this one. I can't let that stand because this is very important for people to know that the reason why the English did that is because of the spies. In fact, one of they call it the Cambridge Five, and we got on that right there in the back. Some man that Dan Martin dedicated his entire life to making sure that they knew that. This one fellow who was one of those spies called the Cambridge Five was even knighted by Queen Elizabeth before they realized that he was a spy. So that way the Russian Soviets. I mean, there's a difference between the Russians and the Soviets.
Yes.
During the time you were there, did you end up learning any of their language?
Did you learn any of the language during the time you were in Serbia? Did you learn any of the language during the time you were living in Serbia?
I look forward to get some of that, Robert. Made the day go good.
Question in the back.
I don't know if you mentioned this or not, it's hard to hear back here, but can you tell us how long he was with the Serbs?
Carl, how long were you in Serbia for, actually, during
33 days.
33 days?
How old were you?
20.
Has the American government recognized this effort on behalf of
Has the American government recognized the efforts of the Forgotten 500?
Nothing that I know of.
And that, Carl said not a thing that he knows. This is one of the reasons why the book was written. It's one of the reasons why there's efforts made by the SNF to highlight this mission, because it's not normally a story that is associated with World War II and the effort to defeat the fascists. And again, the issue of the Chetniks and the partisans kind of highlights that. After the war ended, people tended to give more credit to the partisans for their resistance as opposed to the Chetniks. And there's a lot of political reasons for that, but that really is one of the main reasons why the 500 movement was forgotten.
The one thing after initially first came back, we were allowed to talk like to keep secret because they didn't want the Germans to get any information on where we did and how we did. So for a long period of time, this mission was silence, nothing.
Saying for a long period of time, they were kind of told to be silent about it, and so the story wasn't heard for that. Question in the back.
What was the emotional toll of being in a strange place for so long and not really knowing what was going to happen?
The emotional toll being in a strange place for such a long time and not really knowing what's going to happen to you.
I got to admit, I'm probably somewhat different. It never bothered me. I never had any sleeping problems or any emotional problems since I came back. And yet, I feel sorry for those people that have all these problems. I have no problem. I'm just happy to be here.
Did the Germans ever realize that you were there, and if so, did they make any effort to capture you guys, and how close were they come to it?
Did the Germans know that they were there, and did they make any efforts to capture you guys?
Not that I know. The only thing I give the Krauts credit for, we lost our ball when the rain went down with the airplane. They dug them up, put them in a grave. Now the Chetniks found out about it
what was everyday life kind of like for you living in the Serbian village?
Well, it was good. It was except, we had nothing to do. All we did was hang around and talk and get ready to move the next day. Just keep on the move. You're always worried about, to some extent, whether the German patrols are going to come in and get you. But thank goodness it never happened.
You were there for 33 days. How long was the longest crew there for?
How long was the longest crew there for?
I was told it was around 300 days that it was there. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what the word was among us. That's why we were such a young group. The guys there for 300 days, they come in with 30s. Don't make much.
Yes.
Did you have to finish your 50 flights to go home?
The questioner wants to know if he had to finish his 50 flights to go home. You had mentioned earlier that you had to do 50 missions. And obviously, since you didn't get to 50, she wants to know if they made you do.
One thing they can't do, as I said, is volunteer. They can't make you do anything if you don't want to do it. You quit today, supposedly no hard feeling. I've always doubted that.
Any more questions? We can get one more in the back. Yeah.
You really expressed a lot of gratitude for all the people that helped you. Did you or anybody of your crew or ever hear of anybody make contact with the people that were there that helped you?
Were you ever able to make contact to and again see the people who had helped you in Serbia?
Well, in the first couple of years, I used to get letters from people wanting help, clothing and that stuff. For a couple of years, we did collect clothing and send it back. But that's the only thing. I couldn't send money or anything, but I just started a family and I was scraping like that, trying to go. We did send a couple bundles of clothing back to them.
Okay, we'll take one more question. That's fine.
I would just like to say thank you, for having courage all these years to tell the truth. It would be so easy to forget about you on TV and forget about it, but you are these people who try to protect you and be so mad. That's a big thing. Thank you.
A great final thank you.